Welcome to the week 2 breakdowns for Dana White Contender Series in 2025. First week, not the best, right? It wasn't all that entertaining. Sure, we got the Basinger, Sursurkayev tale to come out of that. Obviously, he picked up that big win on UFC 319 this weekend. But overall, not that great of a card. So hopefully week 2 is a better showing, although it is a very chalky card thus far. I think 4 out of the 5 fights have favorites that are about minus 300, minus 350 or higher. A lot of undefeated fighters on the card as well. But hopefully, the speech that Dana gave after that last week kind of revs the engines of these fighters coming into the preceding weeks, and we'll see if they're able to go out there and showcase and show out and provide the fire that Tuesday normally represents. I quickly want to just recap week 1, and I want to do that for every week, just talking about the previous week. It won't take that long, maybe 3 to 5 minutes at tops. If you want to skip the recap, you're more than welcome to utilize the timestamps in the description and just flip on over to the actual breakdowns. But every week obviously I'm going to have a few thoughts about the previous week, especially in terms of the predictions that I made, the track bets that I made as well. So I just quickly want to touch upon that. So last week, Yuri Panfarov, Christopher Ewert. I did pick Ewert that night, and I was very let down with his aggressiveness and lack of technical abilities, allowing Panfarov to just grind him out there. Again, I didn't get to the betting window on Ewert, but still did predict wrongly there. The Radley De Silva fight pretty much went to what I thought it would be. He utilized a lot of explosivity early, then got to his wrestling, but his inability to land damage obviously kept him from getting a contract. But George Mangos was very tough to deal with in terms of the submission threat that he presented and some of the reversals that he was looking for. So I think Radley was more so just settled on controlling, because if he tried to let go to throw off any damage or look for a submission, that would be the opportunity for Mangos to go out there and provide a reversal or throw up a submission of his own or get back to his feet. So I think De Silva was just playing it too safe, and that's not what you want to be doing on the Contender Series. I was close to pulling the trigger on De Silva there, especially when he got to plus money, just didn't end up doing it. Basinger, Sursurkayev, Murtaza Talia. I was wanting to play the under, didn't end up getting there, but Sursurkayev goes out there. Doesn't look the greatest at the weigh-ins as well. Nearly missed weight, but didn't. But then he goes out there, stuffs all the takedowns of Talia, and gets to his body kick and gets him out of there that way. Very impressive performance. His performance from the weekend, though, against Eric Nolan gives you some issues that he might face when he goes up against legitimate middleweights in the UFC. Let's see how either quickly or slowly they bring him along. But there are some holes that can be exploited in his game. There's no way this guy is anywhere close to Khamzat Chimaev level, but I'm sure he'll get that rub. But I think his ceiling will be coming sooner than later. But still, very impressive performance against Talha. Ty Miller goes out there and outstrikes Jimmy Drago pretty much the way that I expected it to go. Superior striker, good distance management. Ate some big shots in the last round, but clearly did enough work in the first 2 rounds. Looked very good. I was very impressed with what he had. The issue that I had with him when I broke his fight down was that he's still a little bit green. He's only 6-0, so I'm interested to see how the UFC is going to bring him along now that they got him in the UFC. Even Dana said, hey, let's get this kid into the PI, get him a little bit more athletic, and then we can see what we can do with him. But I was impressed with his ability to stay away from the danger that Drago presented and then sticking to his game and just picking Drago apart. I think almost any other opponent probably would have gone out with some of the big shots that Miller was landing. So credit to Drago for being able to withstand that type of damage and see the final scorecard there. All right, main event now. This is the one that I had issues with, and really the reason I wanted to do these recaps was to touch on this fight. First of all, scorecards, very weird, right? Dana thought, almost everybody scoring that fight, either that I saw on social media or just friends that I talked to, they had that fight a draw. Sure, Santana loses the first round, but I thought he did enough work in the second round, enough work in the third round. It wasn't all that much work either from either of these guys, but it felt like Santana with his forward pressure, landing the few shots that he did, I thought he deserved to win those last 2 rounds. And again, Had he not freaking headbutted Ilian in that first round, he might have been able to, ride out that top position for the rest of that first round. Not saying he could or like 100% would have, but he could have, right? And that may have given him the first round. So, you can't cap these kinds of things when guys go out there and just headbutt dudes, right? It almost reminds me of when I bet Igor Severino against Andre Lima. It was going to take him a little bit of time to get into his groove with that fight. Then he goes out there and bites Andre Lima. So, I don't know why I get caught in these bad spots, but again, I thought Santana looked better than the odds suggested that night. I was very happy to get him in that plus 220-ish range. He ended up closing closer to plus 140. But yeah, very, very weird circumstance there. And I'm glad that Dana is being a little bit more conservative with giving out contracts. Last season, he probably gives a contract to Yuri Panfarov. Let's be honest. But stood on business pretty much, said, hey, you weren't all that impressive, we're not giving you the contract. Ty Miller, although it went to the scorecards, that was an impressive performance. He was trying to get the knockout the entire time and did it in an entertaining fashion. And then obviously Sursakov, how can you not give him a contract with that performance? So I'm hoping we see some consistency with Dana White moving forward in terms of handing out contracts, and week 1 was a good indication of what his standards are going to be like. Let's see how week 2 looks. All right, let's now break down this this Contender Series card. Week 2, like I said, a ton of chalk throughout the card. We'll see if we can break it down as best as I can. Let's get right into it. First matchup up, Tommy Cuozzi coming in at plus 250, going up against Ramiro Jimenez, who comes in at minus 325. Now, Tommy is a 7-0 prospect who's pretty much run over everybody he's gone up against. Pretty much everybody was a tomato can, let's be honest. Outside of the one opponent that he finished in the second round, Theo Rianglong, butchered his name. He actually competed on the Contender Series back in 2021 when he came up short against Stephen Wynn. But, he took 3 years off, came back and fought Tommy, was able to deal with his grappling early, but then eventually fell short against the pressure of Tommy in the second round and got TKO'd. But every other opponent, Cuozzi has pretty much taken them to the ground immediately, smashed them, found a submission, or just got that TKO. But it seems like that lack of resistance he's been fighting on the regional scene is really going to come back to hurt him at this level. He seems decent. He has a good understanding of the grappling game. He's good with his top pressure, but that 5-4 amateur record almost kind of shows like, hey, when he is facing notable names or guys that will provide legitimate resistance, that's where he'll start to come up short. And he might get that reality check here this week against Ramiro Jimenez, who used to train out of the Goat Shed in Miami. Now he's actually training down there at the UFC PI in Mexico. Credit to former Alliance MMA head coach Eric Del Fierro for putting together a solid structure and training camp for those guys in Mexico. And I think that was a great opportunity for Jimenez to go down there and really round out his game. He's 10-0, has a nasty boxing game, throws great combinations, mixes it up well to the body, has great durability. I saw him very hurt in one of those fights, but he managed to bounce back in the same round, hurt his opponent in the same round, win the next round, then win that fight on the scorecards. Does a great job in terms of hurting his opponents. He's a cerebral boxer as well. And his defensive grappling is very high level. This is a guy that takedown defense, very good. But even when he does get taken down, he stays very calm and composed. And it's pretty quick that he eventually finds his way back to his feet or finds that reversal and gets to his own damage as well. I agree with Jimenez being a big favorite in this matchup. Cuozzi has not faced somebody like Jimenez in the past, and I think we'll see Jimenez shut down the grappling of Cuozzi, and then from there showcase his superior striking, and I think he picks apart Cuozzi. I think this probably leaks into the second and third rounds with Jimenez finally wearing him down and getting that TKO. But yeah, this again, there's another fighter later on this card where, again, their lack of regional experience is not going to help them when they fight somebody that's actually going to provide them legitimate resistance. And we're going to see the first case of it in this first matchup with Jimenez getting this knockout over Tommy Cuozzi. Our next up, heavyweights going at it here, as we have Josh Hokit coming in at minus 450 going up against Guilherme Uriel, who comes in at plus 350. Now, starting off on the Hokit side of things, he is now 5-0 in mixed martial arts, coming from a collegiate athletic background, which included football and wrestling, and he's really stuck to the MMA game very well. Trains out of the Jackson Wing camp, has a very basic striking game, but he's mastered the basics. Like, it almost reminds me of Michael Aswell from last year, who, really only stuck to a straight and a jab, and he was able to get the better of most of his opponents other than Bogdan Grad. But Hokit utilizes that well, so he doesn't have to desperation wrestle. Like, he's not a guy that needs to get fights to the ground immediately to have success, but he can play around in the striking long enough that he can eventually get that level change at a perfect time to get his opponent down with ease, rather than just trying to expend so much energy working on those takedowns. He has a bit of a personality about him too. I love it. Really doing the Colby Covington kind of thing, but maybe a little bit more likable than Covington. Has a little bit more jokes. But the kid's he's good. He was actually given the contract, but still decided to take a fight in the LFA back in May, and still managed to finish his opponent in the first round. But it's obvious that he was going to make it to the Contender Series regardless. He has a great gas tank as well to go 15 minutes if he needs to, especially for somebody his size. Now, speaking of gas tanks and maybe lack thereof gas tanks, is Guilherme Uriel, who comes over for the LFA promotion, rides a 2-fight winning streak with a 6-1 overall record. His only loss came to Lucas Camacho, who ended up coming over to the Contender Series. I believe he lost. I can't recall against Hugh, but that was a fight back and forth slugfest, and then Uriel eventually started to slow down around that 3rd or 4th minute and got finished himself. He's a BJJ black belt. Doesn't often look to take fights to the ground, but rather just throws big shots and hopes to knock his opponents out. Has some big leg kicks as well, but this is a guy that, since that loss has had 2 wins, but that last win, I can't recall the opponent's name, but that was a fight where we didn't really see Uriel learn from his mistakes in that loss that he had against Camacho, because he was still throwing with big heat. He was still starting to suck wind around that 1.5 to 2 minute mark, but luckily he was still able to land that big shot and get his opponent out of there. But that's not going to work against higher level of competition and guys that know that, hey, let this guy swing for the fences and gas himself out so that I can turn up the volume on him and eventually get him out of there even quicker. I don't really get. I get it. He's 6-1. He's dangerous. He provides finishes. He's entertaining. But in this matchup against Hokit, I think Hokit will see that. I think he'll utilize a stiff jab to kind of keep Uriel at bay. Maybe counter Uriel's big shots with those jabs. Utilize a lot of movement. I think when he's ready and he starts to see Uriel slowing down, he'll go for that takedown. And Uriel, BJJ black belt, but nothing special. I think this is a spot that Hokit can smash through his guard, get to a dominant position, start laying down that ground and pound, and get him out of there pretty quickly. I love Hokit in this spot. I really like the under 1.5. I would take the chalk up to about that minus 220, minus 250 range. I think that Uriel is the main component of that. If this guy somehow makes it to the second round, he's huffing and puffing and probably going to have, a heart attack by the time that second round starts. And that will just mean that Hokit can turn up the volume and get him out of there quickly. So Hokit, educated fighter, has solid fight IQ for a guy that's only 5-0, and I think we'll see that here on full display as he just thwarts the berserker style of Uriel and gets him out of there probably near the ending of that first round. Maybe on the feet, but I think it's going to come from a barrage of shots where he gets him out of there with ease. So give me Hokit and a Hokit round 1. All right, next up we got Kaushik Saikumar coming in at plus 350 going up against Lewis Lee Scott, who comes in at minus 450. Now, starting off on the Saikumar side of things, he, obviously being a guy of Indian heritage, anytime there is somebody that comes into the MMA game, the pro MMA game from the same heritage, I take notice, right? I want to look into them and I want to see, okay, are they the shit or are they just another guy that's, mediocre at best? Because I'm going to be honest, the Indian MMA landscape has not been that great all around. Pujo Tomorrow was able to get a win or two, I believe, in the UFC, but for the most part, Indian fighters have just not fared well at the highest levels in mixed martial arts. Now, Saikumar, I believe, born in Chennai, India, came over to Virginia, I believe as a youngster, and he started training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at 50-50, which is Ryan Hall's gym down there in Virginia, and he has a decent BJJ game. He's a purple belt as of 2 years ago, loves to get fights to the ground when he can, and then his gangly frame really helps him get these weird leverage points that allows him to either submit his opponents or get these dominant positions to get those TKO spots. Striking leaves a little bit to be desired, especially when he's facing other guys that are much better strikers than him. Most notably, his last matchup when he went up against Adamu Issa, who's a Killcliff FC product, Muay Thai specialist. And we saw Issa, pick apart Saikumar for about 2.5 rounds, and it was seeming that it was going to be an Issa decision once it hit the scorecards. But Saikumar got this cool clinch position where he was raising hit one of his knees and then quickly jumped into the other knee, and he landed cleanly on Issa, and it stumbled Issa, and Saikumar landed 2 more shots, although not that cleanly, and then we saw the referee jump in there. But in Issa's offense, I thought that was a bit of a premature stoppage. I know he was hurt, but you got to give the fighter a little bit of chance to kind of work back from being hurt in those spots. And Saikumar, kind of the reaction we got from him once he got the stoppage kind of showed that he knew he probably got away with one. Maybe not so much because of the stoppage, but the fact that he was probably down 2 rounds going into that 3rd round. But again, the kid looks decent with the BJJ game. I think he just kind of struggles in the wrestling game. And I saw a few times in that Issa fight where, he got hit with a few shots that didn't look like they would drop him, but he kind of did just kind of fall back to his back, hoping that his opponent would follow him there so he can get to a more comfortable position. But I think that's going to, show even more when he's fighting at this level, and he's going up against a very tough Louis Lee Scott, who is 9-0 as a professional and one of the hotter prospects to come out of Europe. Now, I originally came across Scott back in about 2.5 years ago when he competed for PFL Europe, and he came through with a nasty 21-second head kick KO over his opponent. He's 4-0 since that matchup, picking up the Aries FC title by defeating a 14-1 prospect in Demarte Pena. Very fun fight there where he utilized a striking advantage, shut down the grappling of Pena. Even when Pena got him to the ground, we saw Scott being the one that was consistently disrupting his base and landing damage of his own off his back. And if we learned anything from this past weekend's UFC, specifically that Dione Barbosa and Karine Silva fight, takedowns don't matter as much anymore, especially if you're the one eating damage from your opponent off their back. So, that style from Scott could help him out should he get taken down, but he is a guy that, does a good job with his takedown defense, with his reversals, with his submission attempts, and that usually helps him get back into more dominant positions or even back to the feet, where he often has an advantage over his opponents. He's a training partner of Lerone Murphy and Lewis McGrillen over there at Manchester Top Team. He's a very solid Muay Thai specialist, throws in nasty combinations, great kicks as well. His durability is definitely up there. He went, I believe, 14-2 as an amateur, 9-0 now as a pro. His last matchup against Yusuf Banat for Aries FC. We saw him get hurt a little bit more than we're used to seeing. His nose got bloodied up with about 2 minutes into that matchup. And that's where we saw his secondary form come into play, where he actually got a well-timed takedown, worked to the back of his opponent, and then as he was slipping off, he actually got the armbar and forced a tap. So very well-rounded, very good fight IQ. If things aren't going right for him in the stand-up realm, which is not all that often, he's usually the one in control in the striking realm, he can go to his grappling and have success there. Now, in this matchup with Saikumar, Scott, I think, has him covered pretty much everywhere. This is going to be one of those moments, just like when I talked about Tommy Cuozzi in the first fight, where the lack of experience on the regional scene is going to affect them at this level on the Contender Series when they face guys that are just so much better than everybody else they've been fighting. We saw Saikumar start to crack a little bit under Adamu Issa in his last matchup. So I don't know how, the matchmakers could go from watching Saikumar struggle in that fight and then plug him into this fight, especially against a killer like Louis Lee Scott. I'm expecting Scott to control this fight. He'll probably shuck off a few takedowns, and then once he gets into his groove with his striking, I think he really touches up Saikumar, and I think he even finds the finish. I think he'll be able to get the finish. I'm seeing the under 1.5 currently on Bet Online. I'm hoping other bookies open up that total at 2.5, and if it's at anything better than -150, I'll probably take a shot there. But I think Scott will showcase his striking dominance here, and that will eventually lead to him getting a knockout over the Indian fighter. And that's just one for you guys who think that I'm biased, picking Indian and Canadian fighters because I am of those heritages. So, all right, next up, one of the funner fights on the card and a little bit more level in terms of, the odds. We got Brandon Holmes coming in at -145, going up against Cam Rowston, who comes in at +115. Now, Holmes is taking this fight on somewhat short notice after John Kunneman was forced to pull out, but Holmes was ready. I had not actually heard of him before jumping into him for this Contender Series matchup, but his tape was very fun to watch. This guy is a nasty striker that loves to walk his opponents down, throwing powerful combinations, landing a lot of leg kicks as well. His takedown defense looks very good. Does a great job in terms of not accepting bad positions, working back to his feet, getting the underhooks where he needs to, and then getting back out into space. He's also very strong in terms of holding opponents up against the cage and having some success there with damage of his own. But at his best, he is a guy that likes to stalk his opponents, land combinations, and eventually get them out of there. His last matchup was against Zach Borrego, who a lot of people will remember as being one of the opponents for Bo Nickel on the Contender Series a few years back. Borrego obviously fallen on some hard times as of late, 6-5 going into that Brandon Holmes fight. And, Holmes almost finished him in the first round, but Borrego had some success in that second round. It seems like the momentum was swinging, and then Holmes was able to bounce back in that third round and eventually get that finish with about 2 seconds left on the clock there. The guy's very durable, very tough to put away, doesn't often take a back step. He loves to dictate the pace and dictate the range of his fights, and a lot of that has to do with the power that he produces and the way that he's able to just hurt his opponents with his hard-nosed kickboxing, Muay Thai style of striking. Trains out of, I believe, North Carolina, out of a smaller gym, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was Gym O, I believe, or Gym O Tribe. I don't remember the name of it. But again, solid prospect. And again, stylistically speaking, a very fun matchup here against the long and lanky Cam Rowston, who is a city kickboxing product. Now, the first time we saw Rowston was actually last season where he went up against Torres Finney, and that was one of those weird fights where Finney was able to stifle most of the striking of Rowston, take him to the ground, grind him out. I think he even got a submission that night as well. But that's Finney's game. Finney just smothers dudes, and Rowston had no answer for it. Rowston has pulled off 3 straight wins since that matchup, although not against the toughest of opposition. He's been taking a lot of grapple-heavy approaches in his fights, utilizing his BJJ purple belt or brown belt. He might have got a brown belt by now. Likes to implement that top-heavy approach. His lanky frame obviously helps him with his jiu-jitsu just as much as it helps with his kickboxing. But the low level of competition is a big concern. And I think him going up against Brandon Holmes here will probably be the toughest fight of his career, or second toughest fight. And I feel this is one where we'll see Holmes kind of shut down the grappling game of Rowston. That's going to force Rowston to strike a little bit more. And Rowston could have some success there, but I think he's going to be on his back foot for the most part. We'll see Holmes chew away at that lead leg of Rowston, and Rowston quite hittable as well. And I think that was actually my analysis of him in his first breakdown last year. We see a little bit more being shown in his last 3 wins, the last 4 fights actually, which is why it seems like he's going to the grappling more than he does than he has in the past, because he is so hittable. So I think Holmes will take advantage of that. We'll see good takedown defense from him. We'll see him dictate the pace, and I think from there we see him eventually find that big shot to put Rowston away here. So I'm going to have to go with the slight favorite here in Brandon Holmes, and I think he wins this fight by knockout. All right, that brings us to the main event of Week 2 of the Contender Series, and it is a matchup between Manuel Exposito, coming in at +325, going up against Jose Delano, who comes in at -425. Now, starting off on the Exposito side of things, he trains out of the Entrum Gym down there in Mexico, alongside Edgar Chairez, Brandon Moreno. I don't believe he's there anymore, but has been there often. Alexa Grasso as well, Diego Lopez, I believe, out of that gym as well. He is 12-2. Oh, sorry, 13-2, and actually had the biggest win, he's looking for his biggest win this weekend, especially to earn that contract. He has a 2-fight losing streak, or had a 2-fight losing streak back in 2023 against some decent competition under the Combate Global banner, and that was a fight where he was unable to really get to his wrestling or utilize his BJJ black belt, and was forced to strike with a lot of these guys, or even got outgrinded himself by stronger grapplers. He seems kind of mediocre in the striking realm. He just does enough to eventually set up takedowns, and from there he's able to control most of his opponents. I think he likes to try to get to the takedowns as quickly as he can. His last 3 fights were under a Fight Pass, or 2 different Fight Pass promotions. I believe it was Budo Sento and I believe UWC, and he faced much easier competition than he was facing on Combate, and that's where we saw him utilize the grappling successfully, because it was easier for him to establish that style. But you see, when he is forced to strike for longer than you'd like, it doesn't really work out that well for him, and that's where you see desperation takedowns start to come out of him. He's going up against Jose Delano, who I'm very happy is getting this opportunity on the Contender Series, because when I first studied him back in 2023, when he was going up against Gabriel Santos for the LFA, I thought that was a very winnable fight for him, and that would have eventually led to him getting into the UFC. But obviously he stumbled that night. He's pulled off 2 straight victories, I believe, since then. He's 14-1 over his last 15 fights after starting his pro career at 1-2 back in 2015. He's a very sharp striker, good range management, great footwork, and throws in nasty combinations as well. I think he was kind of struggling under the power with which Gabriel Santos was hitting him with, and I think that kind of messed with Delano, hence why he ended up losing that fight. But his defensive grappling, very high level as well, so if opponents want to try to take him to the ground, which is what I think Exposito is going to be looking to do here, I think he's going to struggle to do so, and I think we'll see Delano keep this fight upright, and I think from there he just picks apart Exposito. Again, just quickly finishing the background here on Delano, former Shuto champion, former LFA champion. Again, 14-1 run over his last 15 fights. Absolutely crazy. Has a great training camp as well. Yeah, he is more than worthy of the chalk in this fight against Exposito. I think we'll see him stop if the inevitable takedowns are going to come from Exposito. I just don't think Exposito can strike with Delano. Delano is just too sharp, usually very good defensively. And again, once those takedown attempts start coming from Exposito, we'll see Delano shut those down. Then we'll see the demoralized look on Exposito's face, and that will slowly allow Delano to take over and eventually find that finish. If there's under 2.5, I wouldn't mind taking a shot there. Delano by knockout as well. I think Delano crushes Exposito here and earns a contract to the UFC. All right, there you guys go. Contender Series Week 2 broken down for you guys. I should be back tomorrow to break down UFC Shanghai for you guys. I haven't actually gotten to the studying for that as of yet. Hoping to do so tonight, and then obviously finish it off tomorrow and then record for you guys. And that's where I'll talk about the Aaron Pico blunder, which I'm sure I'll get some comments about on this breakdown here. But again, I want to keep this just about the Contender Series, and then we'll talk about UFC 319 on the next podcast, and then obviously break down UFC Shanghai for you as well. All right. Good luck on your Contender Series action this week, folks. I'll see you guys again tomorrow for the UFC Shanghai breakdown. See you then. Peace.